Good morning, everyone. Welcome to UUCC, the UU Church of Canandaigua. I'm Eileen, I'm your minister, and I'm so glad to be gathered here with you this morning. Welcome this morning. I have a few quick announcements to share before we begin our worship service. So if you'll allow me, I will share my screen with you. And let you know about these few little announcements. The first is that we are going to have another Pixar theology discussion group. So back in the fall, maybe you remember we tried out this Pixar theology group. We talked about the feeling of being called, the theology of a call, and the movie Moana. And so on March 24th, we are going to talk about Pixar's movie Coco and the theological theme of sacred memory. We'll talk about death and memory and tradition. If you've never seen Pixar's Coco, or if you want to watch Coco again, it's available on lots of streaming platforms. And also there are DVD copies and Blu-ray copies of it at the Wood Library in Canandaigua. And then I want to let you know about another discussion group, another bit of spiritual programming this spring. We are going to host a common read book group. We'll be reading the book Breathe, A Letter to My Sons by Imani Perry. It is a work on anti-racism that is in the form of a very touching letter to the author's sons. And there'll be a one-time book discussion about this book. And that'll be on April 6th from 6:30 to 8 p.m. It's facilitated by Lynn Overgard. So many thanks to Lynn for facilitating that. Both of these discussion groups have sign-up links that I will drop into the chat momentarily. And with that, let's take a deep breath and let us enter a space of worship. It is time to light our chalice. So if you have a chalice with you or any old candle, let's light them together. And as we do, we'll say or listen to our chalice lighting words. We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together. You know, it is one of my favorite times of year. Winter in general is one of my least favorite times of year, but right now it's maple sugaring time. And to me, that is always a reminder that spring, with all the promise she holds, is so very close. And the Potawatomi people have always told the story that their brother squirrel taught them how to make maple syrup. And settler colonialists laughed. They dismissed it as a quaint, backwards bit of mythology, of which, of course, obviously we have none of our own. It wasn't until relatively recently in the history of settler colonialism in North America that colonizers observed what squirrels do to stave off starvation in that hungry, cold time of late winter, when their stores of nuts are gone and new plant growth has yet to emerge. In late winter, squirrels will climb across the boughs of maple trees in early March, and they'll scrape away a section of bark, allowing the new flowing sap to ooze out. Then they scamper away. They return the next day after the cold night has sublimated the water out of the sap, and they munch on the crystallized sugar that forms on the branch. Colonialism taught us not to notice the squirrels, certainly not to notice them as wise teachers. But the people of this land noticed and learned. They, absent the miseducation of white supremacy, have long known themselves to be part of the same web of life that squirrels inhabit. They know their fellow creatures as teachers and siblings, and they were right that squirrels taught them how to make maple syrup. Generations ago, they repeated the squirrel's process on large scales and saved themselves from the harsh winter's end. And I think this is why we come to church. Here, we do the work of dismantling our miseducation. We come to know ourselves as part of the interdependence of the web of life. And held by the grace of this web and its many teachers, we can survive even the darkest of winters. Let us join together now in song. Will you join with us as we sing our first hymn, For the Beauty of the Earth? Now it is time for a story. Today I have a short story to share with you. It's brief and it's called White Wings Escape, and it comes from the Panchatantra from India. And a picture to go with it. So once upon a time, at the beginning of this story, there was a hunter who set about to catch some birds. So he laid a trap with a big giant net, and he sprinkled bird seeds and grains all around the ground to attract some birds. And he did. He attracted the attention of some ring doves, including White Wing, who was the king of the ring doves. White Wing you see here. And the ringdoves flew down, hungry to feast on all the seeds and grains they saw. And as soon as they landed, they were covered by the hunter's net. At first, the birds, all these ringdoves, started to panic. They flapped their wings and they pulled in all directions. They were scared that they would be trapped forever, that they would lose their lives. And then the king of the ringdoves, White Wing, he said, "My friends, my siblings, we have to pull together to get out of this, or we'll never get out at all. We cannot go in all directions. We have to move together as one. On my count, are you ready?" And then White Wing counted 1, 2, 3. He probably counted in Sanskrit. Ek, do, teen, he said. And on 3, all the ringdoves flew in the same direction together, straight up into the air, and they lifted the net with them. To his amazement, the hunter saw the net lift up like it was flying itself, and his net and all the doves flew away free. And that is the end of our story. And now I want to invite you into our practice of sharing joys and sorrows with one another. We are a congregation who holds one another in our celebrations and in our pain. So whatever it is, whatever big feelings are on your heart today, know that we are with you. We hold them all together. So I want to ask you to use the chat if you have some big feelings to share this morning, and then to use the chat to share those with us. So I ask, are there joys or sorrows to lift up today? Thank you for sharing your joys and your sorrows with us. This morning, we are holding sorrow over family lost to COVID, joy for new plantings, and gratitude for helpful family members. We have gratitude for Ellie's reading and story time this morning, and all our joys and sorrows and many big feelings in reaction to it. Gratitude that school segregation is illegal, hope that one day it soon will actually be over. Sadness that some people are treated badly because of their differences. And finally, we have such joy always at Bill's amazing music. For all of these and the joys and sorrows we hold silently in our hearts, know that we are with you. We hold them together. And now I want to invite you into the spiritual practice of generosity. The good work of this congregation is funded by the gifts of all of you. And each month we share a quarter of our weekly plate offerings with a designated offering recipient, a community partner. This month's community partner is the National Women's Hall of Fame. In 1969, the women of Seneca Falls created the National Women's Hall of Fame, believing that the contributions of American women deserved a permanent home in the small village where the fight for women's rights was centered for so long. The National Women's Hall of Fame is the nation's oldest membership organization, dedicated to recognizing and celebrating great American women's achievements. So there are a couple of ways that you could give this morning. You could give to our plate offering electronically, and there's a link to do that in the chat now. It is our website, canandaiguauu.org/connection/donate. Or you can do that by mailing a check to the church at 3024 Cooley Road in Canandaigua, or by setting up automatic gifts through your bank every week. In any of these cases, if you make a note that your gift is meant to be part of this morning's offering, then we will be sure to share a quarter of it with our community partner, with the National Women's Hall of Fame. We thank you for your generosity. And now I'm going to turn this over to Pat Mells to talk about our annual stewardship campaign, which kicks off today.
Hi there. It's that time of year again. The days are getting longer, the birds are singing joyfully, and the earth is being reborn. And it's time to give UUCC an infusion of To be blunt, money. That's right. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Canandaigua Stewardship Campaign Kickoff. I'm here to ask you to make a pledge to ensure the success of our church into the future. I hope you have had time to read the stewardship letter that was mailed to members and friends of the church yesterday. It contains details about our financial situation. This week, you will get an individualized pledge email reminding you of what you pledged for the current church year and asking you to let me know what you're willing to commit to in 2021, 2022. Our goal is to have the pledges in by the end of March. It's been a challenging year to run a church, but we've adjusted to pandemic times with Zoom services and Zoom Soul Matters groups, access to services on YouTube, remote meetings, and even a quiz night. And although we haven't been able to be together in person, and let's face it, potlucks aren't nearly as interesting without the fellowship they provide, and when the culinary variety consists of leftovers harvested from the far reaches of the fridge, many of us have maintained a connection to the church and our UUCC friends, thanks to technology and a young minister who knows how to use it. Personally, I find that not just the idea of church, but UUCC specifically has played an important part in my life during the pandemic and during bruising political times. This was brought home to me on Christmas Eve. It was a Christmas Eve like no other. There were no kids to think about sharing the joys of Christmas with like in years gone by. There was no need to scurry around cleaning the house in preparation for extended family visits. No one was asking for a contribution of green bean casserole topped with mushroom soup and bacon bits for the holiday feast. The gift shopping had been done in one record-breaking binge at Millennium Games and by whipping out the checkbook. There we sat, revving up Zoom to remotely attend the traditional candlelight Christmas Eve service at the local congregational church, followed by UUCC's YouTube service. Then we thought, why stop there? We followed Christmas Eve services across the country's time zones: Minnesota, Montana, Eugene and Portland, Oregon, and San Diego, California. The experience brought to mind the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears. One of the services was too formal. Multiple ministers in long black robes in a big dark sanctuary. Another was too informal, kind of like a Zoom party. Another was too cowboy, with a Western drawl and steers lowing in the background. Another, too preachy. And in Eugene, there wasn't even room in the Zoom in for wanderers like ourselves. Like Goldilocks, we returned from our cross-country church tour, knowing that UUCC, with its friendly atmosphere, thought-provoking messages from the pulpit delivered by Eileen and a variety of presenters, great role models in the areas of environmental and social justice, moving music, and intimate sighs is just right for us. I'm asking you to take a pause in your busy lives, or if you are free of outside obligations, to refocus your attention during pandemic isolation away from that jigsaw puzzle on the table in the corner and think about the important role UUCC plays in your life. Then, based on your ability to contribute, pledge an amount that feels good. And look, we've already got a head start. 1 pedal down, 7 to go on our way to $65,000. Together, we can launch UUCC into a promising new church year. Thank you for your support.
Thank you, Pat. Now let's take a deep breath in and prepare for some time of centering, followed by shared silence. Get comfortable in your chair. Let some part of you find something solid, a table, the floor, the arm of your chair. Let some part of you find something soft. Rest a hand on your belly. Sink into your couch or your bed if that's where you still are. And breathe deeply with me. Running over the unplowed paths of the city park, my child demands his father read the placards that name each winter bear tree. Young ginkgos and ancient oaks, magnolias with buds already peaking, horse chestnuts, buckeyes, dogwoods. No one need read the next one. Maple, I call out from far behind. It's rare I pass a sugar maple without a whisper of thanks. And suddenly I'm as small as the child is now, trudging through slushy, lingering snow behind my silent father in the east woods. A late winter sun has just peeked over the hills, and we glide through the quiet forest. Such a deep quiet that sometimes, when we quiet ourselves, still our feet, hold tight to the clanging tin buckets, slow our breath, then hold it for a moment. I'm certain we can hear the trees breathing, sap flowing. We return and return each year when the sun and the sap are rising, to inflict our tiny wounds on them again and again, these same woods, these same trees, to whisper thanks and beg forgiveness. And I return and return each year to these moments of morning quietude in dark winter woods, where I can hear nothing but my whispers to the trees and sap whispers in return, promising no grudges, only sweetness. I want to start this morning with a reading from the author Adrienne Maree Brown from her book, Emergent Strategy. Brown writes, "My dream is a movement with such deep trust that we move as a murmuration, the way groups of starlings billow, dive, spin, dance collectively through the air to avoid predators and also, it seems, to pass time in the most beautiful way possible. When fish move in this way, they're shoaling. When bees and other insects move in this way, they are swarming. I love all the words for this activity. Here's how it works in a murmuration, a shoal, a swarm. Each creature is tuned in to its neighbors, the creatures right around it in the formation. This might be the birds on either side or the fish in each direction. There is a right relationship, a right distance between them. Too close and they crash. Too far away and they can't feel the micro adaptations of the other bodies. Each creature is shifting direction, speed, and proximity based on the information of the other creature's bodies. There is a deep trust in this, to lift because the birds around you are lifting, to live based on your collective real-time adaptations. In this way, thousands of birds or fish or bees can move together, each empowered with basic rules and a vision to live. Imagine our movements cultivating this type of trust and depth with each other, having strategic flocking in our playbooks. Here ends our morning reading. Adrienne Maree Brown writes in this book about the idea of our networks for striving toward justice and liberation as just that, networks, natural formations like swarms or murmurations, or the networks of mycelium fungus that live under a forest floor, or, if you will, human communities. She asks readers, organizers, community leaders to envision a movement for liberation that looks natural, looks like part of the interdependent web of life, because it is. We are. And our communities, at their best, reflect our interdependence. A movement with a charismatic leader or an overabundance of resources or power might see rapid growth and look successful because of it, but it isn't sustainable because leaders fail. Resource hoarding cannot last. Dense concentrations of power are bad for all of us in the end. So she calls for community models in the web of life, of which we are all a part. Trees in a forest connect themselves to one another in their root systems. And they're aided a lot of the time by a symbiotic relationship with fungi. A mycelium fungus grows in a shape similar to trees' roots or a human's nervous system, and it attaches itself to the roots of a tree and then to the roots of other trees, helping forge the connections between organisms. And it becomes this great forest facilitator as it grows. It helps the trees connect with the nutrients in the ground and with one another. The right mycelium paired with a tree can extend its root surface to gather twice the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus from the soil than the tree might absorb alone. The fungus helps defend against bacteria and other harmful fungi. It filters heavy metals out of the tree's water source. It also benefits from the tree's photosynthesizing power by consuming many calories of sugar. And with mycelium, a tree is not only aided by symbiosis with the fungus, it's connected to kin of its own species. The fungus network allows underground transmission for trees, sharing resources and information with one another. And wondrously, because diversity provides stability, mycelium networks facilitate compromises between different types of trees, sometimes supporting multiple species at a time. A forest full of oaks is much riskier than a forest that also contains thriving firs and beeches and maples. This is the wisdom of the fungi. Scientists used to speculate that swarming insects or birds used some kind of telepathy to coordinate their movements. The murmuration of so many creatures clearly relies on a delicate dance between uncertainty and consensus. Their maneuvering is so in sync that we assumed they must have been reading one another's minds. More recently, mathematicians have analyzed the movements of murmurating birds. it appears that each bird reacts to the movements of only its 7 closest neighbors. Tracking the whole group would be impossible. Following a single leader would be unwieldy and unmanageable. But trusting in the few neighbors beside them, moving with a neighbor when they dart away or away from a neighbor when they dart too close, that is possible. It's protective, it's powerful. And when it's multiplied by thousands, it's beautiful. So I was thinking about when I worked as a hospital chaplain. And in the hospital where I worked, the chaplain on call had to go to any code blue in the hospital. A code blue can mean a number of things, but usually those alarms go off because someone's breathing or heartbeat stopped. There was a special code team who sprang in when one was called to try to resuscitate the patient. I was present at more code blue calls than I would ever like to remember, but I couldn't honestly tell you each person's role in that team exactly, or even how many nurses there typically were. The team functioned like a single organism with the beauty of a swarm, a murmuration. They had immense trust in one another's capacity because they had to. In the room of someone whose heart has stopped, no one pauses to strategize or negotiate roles. They flew into motion in ways they'd practiced over and over, building that deep knowledge and trust. And I moved that way too when I followed their example. I kept my eyes and ears on only the few triggers I knew I needed to respond to. I was trained to never run to a code, always walk. So I was usually the last one there. My haste was not going to save someone. And a chaplain's job is to steady the energy in a room. They are not aided by adrenaline. So I kept close to the head of an awake or alert and terrified patient, if possible. I kept an eye on the charge nurse for split-second instructions to help or get out of the way. Or I stayed near loved ones close by, watching this trauma, and I held a space for them. I scanned the medical team for reactions periodically to know who was going to need to sit down over coffee and talk this one out when it ended. And I couldn't tell you the exact roles of all my neighbors in that work, but I trusted completely that they were filling them and that I could only fill mine because of them. And this is the way that I hope we can be as a church community. My sincere hope is that we can build such trust and depth of understanding with one another that we can move together in a sublime dance toward a common vision. My hope is that we can live in that way in our wider community, that the church as an organism can learn to know and trust its closest neighbors, our partner organizations in the Finger Lakes community, with whom we share a vision of liberation and justice so well that we can glide alongside one another toward that reality. As we kick off our annual stewardship drive today and ask you to think about how you will support the church in the coming year and how it will support you, I want us to do that from this perspective, as a beehive, a shoal of fish, a forest of care, where you bring some of the resources, protection, and care that this network needs, and you receive back what you need. Far too often, our lives are mired in a consumerist mindset, and it's easy for the church to become mired in that mindset as well. But church is an experiment in community, not consumerism. And this year of all years, it would be especially damaging to bring consumerism to our perspective of stewarding the church. Here's what I mean. Church resources don't work like a restaurant where you come in and pay the menu price for whatever you order, item by item. We don't show up next to your seat in worship at the end of the church year and say, okay, so you had a year of religious education for 2 kids, 38 Sundays of worship, 57 cups of coffee, 6 pastoral conversations with the minister, 3 book groups, and 1 book you actually read, so we'll give you a discount on that, and 2.5 spiritual experiences. It costs this amount in total staff time, building maintenance, and general upkeep. So go ahead and see Jeff on your way out to settle up. No, I see your face is laughing. That's absurd. We don't play that way here. And God forbid we ever do. We are not Wegmans with some singing and clapping on Sunday mornings. We're trying to embody a radically different way for humans to connect themselves to one another. We are trying to be a forest, not a store. The actual cost to maintain the functions of our church as it is about $1,000 per adult member per year. A budget for growth, where we imagine new possibilities for ourselves, like robust religious education programming or wider and deeper justice connections in our community, would be a little more. But we don't send every family a bill for that amount. For some families in a given year, it would be laughably impossible to contribute that amount. For others, it's not a big stretch to contribute that many times over. So that's exactly what we trust will happen, because we are a network of needs, not a collection of consumers. And this church is a forest, not a product on a shelf. If a tree in the mycelium network is attacked by parasites, the forest sends its collective resources its way in defense and in support. And if the tallest tree in the forest has access to 4 times the sunlight, it shares the energy it photosynthesizes through the mycelium network, with young trees still living in the darkness under the canopy. And that's our model here, a natural community. Some of you, I know, have had a hard year of it in terms of resources. You look back over the last year and maybe you lost your job, or you were furloughed, or you saw your retirement fund tank, and you find yourself with a shortfall. I want you to know that this is not a give until it hurts kind of church. This is a we'll hold you while it hurts kind of church. It's a please turn to us to cover your late water bill or drop off casseroles or buoy your spirits kind of church. We know you might not be able to give as much as you did last year, as much as you'd like to this year. And we're with you. I hope you suffer not a second of shame or guilt about that. Some of you, I know, have had a lucky year in terms of resources. Maybe you had an annual travel budget that is still sitting comfortably right where you left it a year ago. Or you got a stimulus check or two that you didn't really need to get by. Or you had some kind of magical foresight a few years ago and invested in Pfizer. I don't know. I want you to know, whatever your lucky situation, that we trust in your generosity. This is why I say every week that we enter a spiritual practice of generosity when we take up our offering. Because actually, your generosity of resources is lifting our whole community. It's holding your neighbors in their pain and struggle. It is building a living justice within our community right now, because it makes this church more accessible to everyone. I'm not ever going to ask you to give until it hurts either. Give until it feels good. Give until it feels like the spiritual practice that the sharing of resources is. We all give what we have to give, wrapped only in sweetness, no grudges. And someday you may need to lean on the generosity of your neighbors here, because luck changes, wells run dry. You can trust that because of you, we'll be here if you need us. This is why we share our own resources as a church organism with our local community. Each month, we give away a quarter of our worship offerings to a partner in the community who is flying in this murmuration toward the same vision of a world liberated from injustice. Because a consumerist model of resource management, a conventional but not natural way of organizing ourselves in single file behind a charismatic leader, is not part of that vision. Liberation comes for all of us together or none of us at all. It comes only with trust in and care for our closest neighbors, and they for theirs, and so on. And what a wondrous love that is. The oaks know this love to be real. The fungi know it. The starlings and the bees and the locusts and the herring know it. And somewhere deep in our being, I believe we know this love to be real too. May it always be so. Amen.
Draw the circle wide. Draw the circle wide. No one stands alone, we'll stand side by side. Draw the circle wide. Draw the circle wide, draw it wider still. Let this be our song. No one stands alone, standing side by side. Draw the circle wide. In your sadness and in your grief, all the pain, it seems there's no reprieve. We will hold you until the storm subsides. Draw the circle wide. Draw the circle wide, draw it wider still. Let this be our song. No one stands alone, standing side by side. Draw the circle wide. Draw the circle wide, draw it wider still. Let this be our song. No one stands alone, standing side by side. Draw the circle wide. Draw the circle wide.
I'm going to close with these words from Adrienne Maree Brown, but I'm going to ask you if you're able to go up into the right-hand corner of your Zoom screen and put yourself in gallery view so you can see each other's faces. Here is our forest. Adrienne Maree Brown writes, "Love can't look away from itself. Vibrating in the cell, fluttering breathless in sustained migration, I feel you, like dust feels water and remembers the home galaxy. It appears nothing is new, never was, and nothing is truly massive when seen in its wholeness. I realize my insignificance is important as yours and begin to love again." Amen. Let us join together in singing our closing hymn, What Wondrous Love.
bliss, oh my soul. What wondrous love is this that brings my heart such bliss and takes away the pain of my soul, and takes away the pain of my soul. When I was sinking down, sinking down, sinking down, when I was sinking down, sinking down, when I was sinking down beneath my sorrow's crown, friends to be gathered round, oh my soul, friends to me gathered round, oh my soul. To love and to all friends I will sing, I will sing. Well, love and to all friends I will sing. To love and to all friends who pain and sorrow mend, with thanks unto the end I will sing, I will sing. With thanks unto the end I will sing.
Let's extinguish our flames together. And as we do, we say these words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.